Thank you for choosing this really important practice. Now, the first couple of minutes of this, I'm going to give a little bit of an explanation. And I want you to, so that you can understand a little more about why these parts of the practice are included. This practice is aimed to be a nervous system regulating practice. Now, depending on what part of your nervous system you are in presently, but more than that, what part of your nervous system you seem to live from generally, will determine the impact that this practice could have for you. For example, if you are highly anxious, say 90 to 95% of your day, you struggle to sleep or have a solid, long night's sleep, you might be spending a really good portion of your days in your sympathetic nervous system. And then other people might be starting from a place where, while they're awake, they're feeling like there's so much to do and never enough time, and really, maybe living in that kind of adrenaline or sympathetic state, but you tend to get adequate amounts of rest, really solid rest overnight. And so your nervous system is potentially sitting in a different place, or maybe a little more able to switch between sympathetic and parasympathetic. I think it's really important for you to understand that we have both parts of the nervous system to be able to use them. So to regulate the nervous system or to solely want to stay in the parasympathetic is not the answer. However, this practice has been created so that if you spend most of your time in your sympathetic nervous system, and whether that's during the daytime or during the day and the nighttime, that you can start to work towards getting some time and space in the parasympathetic nervous system. It's not all meant to be equal and perfect all the time. I think it's unrealistic and sometimes more stressful to have those expectations of yourself, of your nervous system, particularly given the world that we live in and the way in which we live in this Western world. But I do think it is important for us to try to nurture the parasympathetic nervous system, or nurture ourselves by coming into or towards the parasympathetic way of being, that state of rest and digest, as regularly as we can, to get a little bit closer to balance. So this practice, and it's one that actually a really good friend of mine who's an osteopath and a yoga teacher, and we were together at this training recently, and she was talking about some of the facets that you would include as part of trying to regulate the nervous system a little more, to find maybe a little more balance or just a little bit more time in the rest and digest if you don't tend to spend time there. And we were speaking a bit about the yoga tools that we have for this. So one is meditation, or it could even be shavasana. They are two different things, but that's one. Another is inversions for your proprioception. When your legs are above your heart and your head, it starts to shift the energy from that being upright and that doing to a more relaxed way of being. I'm not talking headstands, don't worry. Forward folds can create a sense of safety in the nervous system, but more specifically, and this was something that I actually learned from her, more specifically, we hold our stress response in the upper back. And so when we fold forward and we create a sense of opening through those muscles, we then start to undo that stress response. So we're not creating necessarily a parasympathetic response, but we're opening up what is the stress response. What I will add to that, and we had a little bit of a discussion post that, was that there's, in folding forward as well, we're kind of getting a little bit of pressure through the internal organs pressing back towards the spine, and the vagus nerve, which is one of the main nerves that people often talk about as having a direct impact on the parasympathetic nervous system, i.e. That can help you come into the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve. So when you fold forward, you can sort of press the organs to more specifically kind of touch onto the nerve, which that touching action can stimulate the nerve to become a little more alive, and therefore bring you a little maybe closer towards having that rest and digest experience. And then breath work. And not, again, the breath work that you think, but conscious breathing, which creates a single pointed focus, so it becomes a sort of meditative practice. But more than that, when we are consciously breathing using the glottis, which is kind of the muscle at the top of the throat that is connected to the vagus nerve, and so in using the glottis, we are essentially using the vagus nerve. We are, again, getting that stimulating effect for the vagus nerve. And then the same thing as well, you know, maybe we're actually moving the diaphragm in its all directions, and that as well is getting that pressing sensation a little bit further down on the vagus nerve in the body. So this is all important information for you to just have a bit of an understanding of physiologically what we might be doing when we're doing these practices, so that you can see that it is going to have an impact, but depending on where you're beginning from, it may not feel like a whole heap at first, because it will take practice to really kind of train your body to recognize the parasympathetic is actually still there, despite the amount of time that you might live in a heightened or anxious or stressed state or way of being. So let's begin. And we're actually going to begin with some breathing and start to bring it more towards a single pointed focus, so we can then drop into a forward fold, our inversion, and then our final meditation. I am sitting on a bolster. If you have a pillow, you can add a pillow or a blanket or a meditation cushion, whatever you might have. Sit as tall as you can so that the shoulders maybe even roll back and down, and lengthen through the back of your neck. Close your eyes. Soften your jaw, your mouth. And this might feel a little difficult. So again, it just really depends on where you're beginning from. We want to try to inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose as a starting point. In this inhaling through the nose and this exhaling through the nose, we start to remind our body that we actually can be in somewhat of a resting state right now. Because when we are more towards that rest and digest, that parasympathetic, our body will naturally use its organs of respiration, and the nose is what we would inhale through and out of when we're in a more relaxed way of being. When we're more tense or anxious, we might find that there's a bit of mouth breathing because our body feels that it needs that auxiliary option to help get the oxygen that it wants, that it needs to survive. So here we begin, in and out of the nose. No forcing, no straining. Noticing where it flows to. Maybe you're really feeling this in the upper chest. It's okay if that's where you're beginning. After you've taken a few breaths in and out of the nose consecutively, you might then keep breathing in and out of the nose, but see if you can get the breath a little more to the lower rib cage. Maybe you start to feel it filling not just the front but also the sides, maybe a little of the back body. Definitely starting with the front and the sides. These slow breaths. Now if you can, could you make your inner breath a little louder? So as you breathe in, there's kind of this point at the top of the throat that you can almost hear the breath moving past, through and back out of. That's the glottis. So like you're really trying to pull the breath. Again, we're not forcing it, but we're gently encouraging it towards the back of the throat, very back of the mouth first, the back of the throat down. And the same back out. And in one direction, it might feel a little easier. Can you hear it? Like the sound of the ocean. Let's take about 4 more rounds like this. Hearing the breath on the inhale through the nose. Letting it fill chest, rib cage, maybe belly, back body, and then reversing that back out. Breathing in. And out. Breathing in. And out. Take one more like that. Now we're going to add to that. So if you want, you can stick with that exact same breathing. What we can also add a count to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in for 4 and out for 4. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. 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 In, out, in, out. in, out. And let your breath return to its normal flow. And then you'll slowly blink open your eyes, and we move into a seated forward fold. This again might be where sitting on a blanket or a meditation cushion might be helpful. And really you can kind of have your legs in whichever direction you want. So it might be the legs out straight. It might be that you find in butterfly it's a little easier to get the pelvis tilting forward. We want to try to find that place where the head can drop down so that we're spreading across the muscles through the upper back in particular. So if you have even a pillow or a bolster or a block to catch and support the neck, do that. And then your eyes will close, and you can choose whether you want to keep finding the breath in that same way that we began here. It might be that you're simply breathing at your own rhythm, your own place. And what you might notice is that the neck or the jaw is a little tense. You might notice that the upper back is super resistant and tight. Maybe the sensations begin in the lower half of the body. Whatever it might be that you feel, it's no matter. It really doesn't make a difference unless there's some sort of pinching pain, maybe in your joints or maybe really specifically somewhere in the spine. So if you have a lower back or a disc injury, forward fold like this might not feel great. And so being a little more upright where the stretch is coming from the head dropping instead of the back rounding could be more supportive. And if you're finding that the mind is pretty busy here, because that can definitely be the case, this is where we can come back to the breath. And through seeing the breath, following the breath, hearing the breath, directing our senses towards the breath. So what we might see or hear or feel, that redirection of the mind again brings in that sort of meditative way of being. That's essentially where we begin with meditation. And what can happen from time to time is that even though you've found the breath and you're noticing its sound or its count, its temperature, whatever it might be, the mind has a tendency to wander to all of the to-do lists or the memories, all of the habitual patterns that it already has. It likes to stay there. But when you do notice and you recognize that it's left the breath, or that it's wandering away from your body, this space, this moment, there is always an opportunity for you to redirect. And as one of my teachers says, it's no problem. There is no problem that it wanders. And the problem arises when we see that it has wandered and we don't choose to come back to what it is that we're doing, to this present moment where we are. This is a process, remember, it's not going to take you to the end goal or result immediately. That's okay. It's normal. Finding the breath. We have around 1 minute left here. Last 2 breaths. Slow, really slow lift up for the torso. Your next shape is legs up the wall. We call it waterfall pose or Viparita Karani. And this is a really great way of soothing the nervous system. It's that act of turning yourself upside down, essentially, because there's got to be some safety when we do that, right? So you can do this with your legs up against a wall. I'm going to show you what it's like without that. Now, you don't have to have something under your hips, but I tend to find that it just positions the pelvis in a way that the legs can float above you. And an addition that you can potentially add to this is the arms lifting up too. So in general, this is a great, really fantastic way of redirecting lymph from our extremities to the main processing centers, the lymph nodes around the groin, around the armpits, around the throat and the neck. And I'm going to start with my hands up for a little bit, but I will return them to the earth soon. And really, we shouldn't be any effort here. There's just bones stacking on bones, legs floating. If the knees need to be a little bent, let them be bent. Same with the arms. The fingers don't have to be stretching upright, they can be soft. And the same for the toes, let them be soft. Your eyes will close. And you might automatically feel this kind of downward movement, this returning to the earth. You might even feel a sense of the upper back spreading on the earth, depending on the position that you're in, or just in general what you're feeling. And this is another opportunity to come back to the breath. The breath within the practice is what makes yoga different to so many other forms of movement. It's this incorporation of breath and body and mind. The mind finding the breath, finding the body, staying present, focused. Now you can keep the arms lifted, but I'm going to lower mine down now. We're here for another couple of minutes. So this is why using a wall or having something to rest your legs against can be helpful, but I'm feeling pretty comfy here with my feet to the sky. Breath softening. My body, my blood pressure. I'm remembering what it's like to not actually necessarily be doing a whole heap. At any point in time though, if you really feel any tingling or something that doesn't feel right in the legs, or you feel like you're having to strain to keep them there. Another option is to bend the knees so that the feet are still above the hips, but you're a little closer to center. It becomes a little more like a fetal position, which is also a really often a remembrance of a safe position that we began in. Not always, but often. Just a couple more moments left here. And the first step to release is to bend the knees, maybe a little tuck of the knees to the belly. Just take a moment. There's no rush out of this. You might, however, feel a rush of blood to the feet. And then the feet can come down to the earth. And they land, they touch down. And then you can slide your bolster or your pillow maybe under your knees. We're in a final shape, Shavasana. However, if lying is not a safe, lying like this is not a safe place for you, you can be upright, seated, leaning against a wall, in a chair. You can be on your side. I'm going to take a final few minutes here in meditation. So different to Shavasana, where we're really integrating all of the practices, we're going to begin with meditation. And we're going to use a mantra for the meditation, the mantra to be spoken softly, maybe even almost like an internal whisper. The mantra will be Om. And you're not chanting Om, it's not that you're singing it inside of your mind, it's an anchor. The word Om is an anchor to the two parts of your breath, the inhale and the exhale. So as you inhale, you'll say the word Om, like a whisper. As you exhale, you'll say the word Om, like a whisper. Inside your mind, inhale, Om, exhale, Om. You'll keep flowing like that, the same as your breathing. If the mind leaves, and you see that it has done so, you simply come back to the inhale, Om, exhale, Om, Inhale, Om. Exhale, Om. A single point of focus. This soft mantra, Om. Letting go of the mantra, the word Om. Letting your breath flow now. We integrate Shavasana in whichever shape you find yourself in. Let yourself be there as best you can. For it is in these moments where we sink into ourselves that we realize how much we have through all of the experiences. Joyful, the hard. This is simply an opportunity to remember that through all of those experiences, we are still whole. And this integration is us coming back into that remembering, the remembrance of our wholeness, that all of these parts, our fight, flight, our rest, digest, all of these parts are part of us. They are important. They are what make us whole. All of these experiences, they are important. They are part of us, our pathway. They make us whole. And beneath it all, whatever rises, whatever falls, whatever comes, whatever goes, you are whole. as you start to come back to your body. Notice its edges, your skin, your clothes, the earth beneath you, anything else that may be under, to the side, above you. And you'll start to feel your fingers, your toes, gentle movement returning, maybe your breath deepening. And eventually, you'll come to a seated position if you are not there. And just as we began, sitting tall, eyes closed, roll the shoulders back and down. Keep the eyes closed for just one more moment. Take one last breath here. And then slowly blink the eyes open to let whatever light there might be outside of you back in. Bring the hands together. We bow head to heart in gratitude for these moments that we carve out for ourselves, for our well-being, for our longevity, for our vitality. May you continue to come back to this practice in particular time and time and time again. Thank you for joining me. I will see you soon.